What's up, beautiful people? I did a give the other day on how to show up at the top of ChatGPT, but what I did is I walked through the fundamentals, and this time I want to go through the details. So, a lot of you that are techie and into the nuances of AI, you'll enjoy this. If you have less of a preference of techie stuff, then forward this to your team. So, what I did is I did a case study, like a white paper, and I wanted to prove from a baseline of nothing that you can create content and entities, products, services, things like that conceptually, and fully control the output of AI. And so what I did is I wanted to create like a clean room test. So, but what I mean by clean room is like there's absolutely no noise whatsoever, true zero. And you know how freaking hard it is to search ChatGPT, let alone Google, for a phrase and get absolutely zero results, like nothing. So that's what I wanted to do. So I came up with the persona Demoptimize Bertanesio AI. Now, the reason why I did that is because I wanted it to have a clean room result of nothing, no disambiguation, no like close recommendation, no were you thinking about this? Like it literally came back with nothing. And so on ChatGPT, but I also wanted to be able to clearly communicate and illustrate that obviously I created that entity because of the representation and parallels to my name. So I wanted no results in Google, nothing in ChatGPT, no hallucination, and no closest match recommendations. And look at this. Absolutely nothing on Google and ChatGPT. So the baseline proves that I wanted to have like a new entity that it can remain invisible in both Google and AI indefinitely if it has no signals. So I had started a page and like it just had the name and that was it. So it looked like this, right? So that's what I created. All it said was I'm Demoptimize Bertan SEO AI. And then days later, there was nothing in Google or ChatGPT. And so what I did is I then added just some base biographical information, made up a location, birth date, address, place of birth, and a little paragraph summary. Days later, nothing again. And so when I first started this, I really wanted to show longevity of nothingness, because to do a true test, you can't start with like something. You have to start with absolutely nothing and prove the nothingness first. Now from there, I started to add trust signals. So after I added the content, I added trust signals. And so if you're not familiar with what schema is, I like to refer to it as Google's love language. Because when Google goes to a page and it looks at the content or the product or the service, it makes educated guesses, reads the content and says, oh, I think this is about X that's on the screen and Y that's on the screen. But you can actually tell Google what that is. So instead of Google guessing what a product or service is, like let me actually show you an example over here for a lead that I'm auditing right now. So if we look at like a page, this is something about, automation across endpoints. And so it makes educated guesses. But with schema, which is little snippets of code you add behind the scenes. So on this page, here's the code. And within that code, Google identifies this. So there's a video, there's a product, and then there's an FAQ. So here's the question, here's the answer. Here's the question, here's the answer. And so this clarity on the product, here's the product name, here's the product description, reviews and ratings. And then on the FAQs, here's the question, here's the answer. What that can do is it opens you up for the opportunity for what's called position 0, which was the big expanded results. But now this is largely Google's AI overview, is what was the equivalent of position 0. So now instead of Google having to guess, you can tell Google with clarity what your product and service is. You can also do this like with person schema, right? So if you go search, my name, like this is influenced by person schema. And so if you want to really push your brand, your personal brand, your company name, and you need these big blown out results to consume the whole page, that comes from schema signals. All right, so after adding it, now you can start to see that we get some triggers in here, and it doesn't have full clarity, and it's starting to go like, whatever damn optimization is, refers to some technology, and then it starts to get some mixed match results with me and my agency. So then after that, we started to drop social media signals, and then that's when Google started to pick it up. And so AI didn't need like 50 blogs and a ton of content. We only have this one page. We now have schema. We now have a Facebook profile. And so it just needed corroboration. So as I started to drip these things one at a time and then wait and then drip a thing and then wait, it started to finally mix and match things, which is what I wanted to avoid. And so the idea of this name was didn't exist. It's unique enough or identifiable enough that I could say that's obviously me, but it was hopefully diversified enough it wouldn't mix it with my actual personal brand. And so it started to get some mixes and matches because I had added Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram profiles. Schema was now active, and so there's multiple signals reinforcing the identity. But it started to confuse the profile with me. And so we had to fix that disambiguation. And so the way that we did that is you don't fix AI confusion with more content, you fix it with clarity. So what I did is I introduced a corrective variable. I added a disclaimer in the schema that clearly differentiated between me and the fake persona. And so here's the verbiage where it says, this character, Demoptimized Bertana COAI, is entirely fictitious. It is not intended to represent or impersonate any real individual, particularly myself, Damon Burton, though Damon Burton created it. It should not be confused with Damon Burton, who is a real individual. I am an agency that created the persona and has no direct connection to the content or representations, blah, 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 right? And I said Damon Burton should not be affiliated with Demoptimized Bertana SEO. And when you tell AI there are two different entities, they are related topically, not identical personally, and here are the distinct attributes between the differences, then you reduce that ambiguity. And it started to work great. So if you're going to do this, obviously you're probably not going to do this as a test, but if you want to do this for actual output and content control, then you want to do this early. And so you want to keep the attributes distinct. You want to define each entity with its own schema, ideally on its own pages or domains, and use consistent naming across platforms such as your page versus your product versus your blog versus social media, and add explicit relationships to clarify context if you need to. So after that, the persona was locked in, and here's what it takes to lock in that visibility. So afterwards, by October, ChatGPT now recognized the persona as its own. It recognized it not as a typo and with any sort of disambiguation between me. It was not a variation of me, and it was a standalone entity with consistent context about itself. And so now if you ask it the same thing that we gave examples of earlier, it says that it is a persona, and it says that it was intentionally created as a test, and then it clarifies the connection between it and me, but defines that there is a difference between it and me and the core concepts of what the test is. And so now you can see all sorts of results, and it's got real clear output as it being a persona as a marketing test, right? And so here's ChatGPT, Perplexity, Google AI overviews. And so basically, to summarize this, what we had to do is create the profile, give it definition with schema, clarity, add corroboration and clarity signals with social proof, and then clarify to separate the disambiguation to define explicit separation. And what this proves is that you don't hack LLMs, you teach them, you feed it content. You feed content in a structured manner, give it explicit definition, and then validate it with external signals that have consistency across multiple platforms. Now, to close this out, here's what's interesting, is after I published a little summary of this, then I wanted to see if I could change the output in a short period of time now that it's like pinging and radaring this pretty consistently. So after I published all this and started to get a lot of these signals locked in, I did one announcement. I shot over like a press release to Google News, which got syndicated to this WRAL News, which is, somebody told me where it's at, some specific location. But I did Optimized Artificial Intelligence, which is my sister agency to SEO National. We did a clean room experiment that AI is trained by SEO. Now here's what's fascinating after I published. So I published an article that talks about everything I just walked you through. I did an article on the timelines. After I published the timelines, I sent out a press release that said, I published the timelines. Now check this out. Now when I prompted, who is Demoptimized Bertana SEO AI, like when I asked about this, the prompt after that that ChatGPT asked me for. It said, if you like, I can show you a timeline of when and how this persona first started appearing publicly. So me feeding it content, saying that I released a timeline, now prompts it to ask people if it wants to see a timeline. So not only can you control the output, but you can control the following prompts that it generates and suggests to other people. And then it walks through this timeline of exactly what I just walked you through. So there is your proof of the variables and how conceptually simplistic it is to control the narrative of your product and brand on ChatGPT.